The wind blew dry across the Arizona plains, carrying the smell of dust and mesquite. The land was silent, save for the low creak of a windmill that hadn't turned in weeks. Amos Cutter stood on the porch of his farmhouse, his hand shielding his eyes from the blazing sun. He was a man built from the same earth he farmed. Hard, cracked, and tired. For 20 years, he'd lived out here, alone, long after the world had forgotten his name. His fields were bare, his cattle thin, and his heart emptier than the dry creek bed that once ran behind the barn. The war had taken his family, his wife to sickness, his son to a bullet, and all that remained was the land. That, and his stubborn will to survive. Every day was the same. He woke before dawn, worked until the heat drove him inside, ate beans by lamplight, and listened to the desert sing through the night. It wasn't peace, just habit. A man could get used to loneliness if he lived with it long enough. Then, one afternoon, as the horizon shimmered with heat, he saw movement near the canyon ridge. At first, he thought it was a coyote, but the shape stumbled, fell, then tried to rise again. A person. Amos squinted, his weathered hand tightening around the rifle, leaning against the porch rail. He waited. The figure drew closer, slow and unsteady. It was a woman, barefoot, covered in dust, her dark hair tangled and streaked with blood. She was dressed in what was left of Apache clothing, the kind soldiers didn't take kindly to. Amos's gut twisted. He'd seen this before. Raids, fights, families torn apart. The army had swept through last week, chasing what they called stragglers. They didn't leave much behind. The woman collapsed in the dirt road, a few yards from his fence. Amos hesitated, torn between instinct and memory. Helping her could mean trouble, but leaving her there, that wasn't something he could do. Not anymore. He grabbed a canteen and walked down the path, his boots kicking up dust. She tried to rise when she saw him, eyes wide with fear, but her strength was gone. Amos knelt beside her, offering water. She stared at it like it was a trick. Then, with trembling hands, she took it and drank. "Easy now," he said softly. "Ain't no harm coming to you here." She said nothing, just stared at him, wary and exhausted. Her wrists were bruised, her lips cracked from sun and thirst. Amos could see the outline of what must have been a bullet wound on her shoulder. Hastily wrapped with a strip of cloth, he lifted her gently, carrying her toward the cabin. She was light as a child. Inside, he laid her on his cot and fetched bandages and a clean shirt. The room smelled of wood smoke and tobacco, the air still and heavy. He hadn't had company in years, and now here she was, a survivor of a world that hated her, lying in his bed. Amos cleaned the wound carefully. She winced, but didn't cry out. Her eyes followed his every move. When he offered her a piece of cornbread, she took it without a word. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. No answer, just silence. Then, after a long pause, she spoke a single word in broken English, something that sounded like Naita. He nodded slowly. "All right then, Naita. You rest. You're safe here." But he knew That wasn't true. Out here, nobody was safe. Not a white farmer, and sure as hell, not an Apache woman. Night settled over the desert like a blanket of coal dust. The horizon burned orange for a heartbeat, and then sank into black. Amos lit a single oil lamp, the soft glow throwing long shadows against the cabin walls. Outside, coyotes called across the canyon. Low, lonely cries that echoed in the empty dark. He sat at the table, elbows resting on the scarred wood, staring at the woman sleeping on his cot. Her breathing was shallow but steady now. The fever had broken after he'd washed the wound with whiskey. She was tough, tougher than she looked. Amos had seen the army ride through just days before, hunting for what they called renegades. He remembered their laughter, the way they dragged trophies from the Apache camp. He had looked the other way back then, telling himself it wasn't his fight. But now, the war had found him anyway. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and took a slow sip. The taste was bitter as regret. When dawn crept through the cracks of the shutters, Naita stirred. She blinked at the light, confused, and tried to sit up. Amos rose from the table and steadied her with a hand. "Take it easy," he said. "You got a hole in your shoulder big enough to fit a dime." Her eyes darted toward the window, then the door, like a trapped animal. Amos stepped back and nodded. "Ain't nobody here but me. If you want to go, you can, but you'll die before you reach the ridge." She looked down, silent again. He could tell she understood more English than she let on. There was pride in her gaze, defiant, proud even in weakness. He fixed her a plate of beans and bread, placed it near her, and went outside to tend the animals. The sun rose hard and fast, turning the sky pale and merciless. As he worked the pump for water, he kept glancing toward the cabin. Part of him feared she'd be gone when he returned. Another part feared she'd stay. When he came back, she was still there, sitting up now, watching the doorway. She had wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, her posture straight and still as a statue. Amos set the bucket down and gave a small nod. "Figure you'll need a place to rest a few days," he said. "After that, we'll see." The woman said nothing, but her gaze softened just a fraction. Amos turned to the stove. He could feel her eyes on him as he cooked, measuring him, maybe judging him. By afternoon, a dust cloud appeared on the far trail. A single rider. Amos's stomach tightened. He took his rifle from the porch rail and watched as the horse drew closer. The rider was a blue-coated soldier. Amos cursed under his breath. He glanced toward the window. Naita was already on her feet, clutching the blanket like armor. "Stay quiet," he whispered. He stepped onto the porch just as the soldier reined up, dust swirling around the horse's legs. "Morning," the soldier said, scanning the property. "You seen any Injuns pass through here?" Amos shook his head slowly. "Ain't seen a soul in weeks." The soldier squinted past him, suspicion written all over his face. "Mind if I look around?" Amos's grip on the rifle tightened. "Reckon I do mind. Ain't much to see but dirt and disappointment." The soldier smirked, but didn't press it. "Keep your eyes open, old-timer. There's a wounded squaw run off from the raid. Dangerous, they say." When the man finally turned his horse and rode off, Amos waited until the sound faded into the distance. Only then did he exhale. He went back inside. Naita was standing near the door, trembling, not from fear, but fury. "They kill all," she said quietly, her voice rough from disuse. "All my people, child, mother, gone." Amos set the rifle down. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Two people with nothing left but ghosts. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt clumsy, too small for the weight behind them. She turned away, staring at the small window that framed the endless desert. "Why you help me?" she asked after a while. Amos scratched his beard, searching for the truth. "Maybe 'cause I done too much looking the other way. Maybe 'cause I'm tired of burying what's left of good in this world." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Outside, the wind began to rise again, whispering through the dry grass like a warning. That night, Amos dreamed of the war, of fire on the horizon and the cries of his wife as the fever took her. He woke before dawn, heart pounding, sweat cold on his neck. From the corner of the room came the soft sound of movement. Naita was awake too, feeding the fire for the first time in years. He wasn't alone in the dark.